start by welcoming everybody to the PRCA Global Series, featuring global experts and market spotlights tailored for our members around the world. I'm Jo Brophy, and I'm delighted to be your host for today's session. And I'll be joined by our esteemed guest, Crispin Manners. Crispin is the chairman and CEO of Onva Consulting and author of books Grow, Build, Sell, Live, a practical guide to building and running an agency and actually enjoying it. And his latest book and the inspiration for today's session, How to Sell Value Demystified, a guide for communication agencies. So in today's insight session on how to sell value, Crispin's going to guide us through transitioning your agency to a value-based model, securing client buy-in, and seamlessly aligning your team on that journey. It is an interactive session, so please do feel free to use the Q&A box throughout. And also we've built in some time for questions at the end. So with that, I'll hand over to Crispin.
Hi everyone, and thanks very much, Jo, for the invite today. As Jo said, I'm going to cover 2 or 3 areas, so I'm going to go reasonably quickly through it, but if you have got questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. I'm delighted to be speaking today about a topic which I believe could transform the way PR and PR professionals are perceived and deliver the rewards that you all deserve. So why am I here? I've been working in PR for 40 years, initially running an agency, during which time I was director of the UK PRCA and for a time its chairman. I also developed a planning methodology that guaranteed results for clients in response to the dot-com crash and the impact of 9/11. And today I advise agencies across the world on how to achieve what they want from their business. And I've captured the lessons I've learned along the way in 2 books that Jo mentioned, the latest of which concentrates on making the switch from focusing on time and activity to focusing on value. I aim to answer 3 questions today about making the switch to selling value. And I'm encouraging you all to do that because I see wonderful PR people, both agency and in-house, delivering miracles every day for their organizations and not getting the recognition or rewards they deserve. The reason for that is simple. Over the last few decades, PR people have trained themselves and their clients and colleagues to focus on activity over outcomes and on time rather than value. I think this is a major mistake and has undermined the way that PR and PR professionals are perceived. And my goal is to encourage you to begin the switch from time to value, as I believe it could transform your lives. So what are the people who have right of veto over whether a budget exists or not looking for in today's uncertain world? The answer is simple. They want greater certainty of achieving their objectives. And they want certainty of achieving a healthy return on investment from everything they do. And they'd rather do nothing than risk wasting time and money on activities that cannot show a cause and effect in advance, a guarantee of success, if you like. This attitude is clearly a threat to a sector that's unwilling to guarantee anything. If a CEO asks what value the organization is getting from the money it spends on the PR agency, what would the normal response be? It's likely to be an activity-based response, like we got some brilliant press coverage. But why does that matter? It matters because today the typical response focuses on activity and increases uncertainty at a time when there's a hunt for more certainty. So the big question behind my presentation is why aren't PR people valued in the way their real contribution deserves? And the answer, I believe, lies in Stephen Covey's quote. Much of what we do doesn't seem to be what matters most to our clients. And the root causes lie in an unwillingness to guarantee results, a feeling that because we aren't the only contributor to an outcome, that our contribution isn't valuable, and a belief that what we do is so amorphous that we can't calculate what it's worth. Given these 3 factors, it isn't surprising that we're not perceived as positively as we should be. But the rewards for switching to selling value rather than time are significant. More profit and therefore wealth for you and everyone in your agency. less pressure on time, and therefore better work-life balance, and more enjoyable work, and therefore a happier and more productive team. Every day, agency owners make choices that affect the performance of their business, quite often automatically and subconsciously. So I hope this session encourages you to make a conscious choice to introduce a value-based approach. But to be clear, this doesn't have to be an all or nothing switch. You can continue to use a time-based approach when it makes sense to do so. So the first question I want to address is, how do I set a value-based price? This is covered in detail in my book, but I'll give you some key thoughts now. I'm sure most of you will be familiar with Simon Sinek's golden circles. They act as a helpful reminder of the change we're talking about. We need to shift from focusing on what we do to why we do it, the business outcome or impact and return on investment that matters to an economic buyer. We also need to be explicit about how we do it, the unique way we contribute that increases the certainty of achieving the outcome. I think there are two main reasons why agencies don't value what they do more. First, they don't focus on the business outcome to be delivered. And second, they don't highlight the contribution they make to business value through the outputs and outcomes achieved. As a result, both the client and the agency takes the value of what the agency achieves for granted. The net result of behaving in this way is that it's very hard to command a premium price for work that is undertaken, or to be in control over how much you deliver for the client. The global VP for brand marketing of a huge technology company recently said to me that the best advice she received in her career is, you need to seek out people who know more than you. Find the experts and work with them. You must run towards expertise, not away from it. The definition of an expert is a person who is very knowledgeable about or skillful in a particular area. In other words, being an expert covers knowledge or skills or both. So presenting you and your people as experts is essential to commanding a premium. But a lot of agencies accentuate lack of experience with the job titles they use, like junior account executive. They choose job titles to signal career progression rather than increasing expertise. For example, account exec, account manager, account director. The expertise associated with these job titles is at best implicit. The trick is to make it explicit. For example, people you may assign a junior title to today might have a lot of knowledge or skill in a particular subject, like social media or a certain platform like TikTok. If this is the case, it makes sense to present them as your TikTok expert, not just an account manager. I believe there are four main components that impact exactly how much you can charge. There are usually two areas of value related to a client's business objective that you can calculate in advance: the value of success and the cost of failure. Clients will often have alternative options for achieving their objectives, like using advertising, for example. It makes sense to understand the price of these other options. You can calculate that by asking the client the right questions or by calculating it logically behind the scenes. More of this later. If you don't have to be the only contributor to achieving an objective for your contribution to be valuable, you don't have to impact every step on a journey, but you do need to be able to show where you can make a difference. By identifying where you make a valuable contribution, you'll create a way to be connected with the value of the objective. In any market, the people who are seen as the most effective command the highest prices. Haaland is paid a base of $553,000 a week because he is the best goal scorer in the Premier League. But the same applies to chefs, to hairdressers, to lawyers, to tax accountants, and yes, to PR people. For other the other intangible value that impacts how much you can charge is the level of confidence and belief that you, your team, and your clients have in your ability to deliver a contribution to outcomes of value. So the more you build the perception of your expert knowledge and skills, the higher the premium you can add to what might be seen as a market price. That's why you need to focus on building belief and confidence through the way you present your why, your how, and the proof that you deliver outcomes of value. And it's why you need to practice self-acknowledgement by systematically identifying every day the value of your contribution to client success. So let's look at a value pricing example based on a real client brief. Imagine that a private equity-backed company that delivers in-home optometry services asks you to deliver a project to help them recruit optometrists. The brief is a simple one: to raise awareness and understanding of the company to help attract optometrists. This is a typical user buyer brief. Your first job is to convert this into an economic buyer brief, to understand the true value you will contribute to the business through your work. A typical time-based response to this brief would be to get the right messages used by the right influencers in press coverage. As a simple activity, where the ideas and strategy is usually provided free of charge, let's imagine that the estimated total number of hours multiplied by the hourly rates produced a fee of £10,000. But you shouldn't take the brief at face value. You need to ask questions to establish the true value to the client before you offer a price. So asking questions is essential because some outcomes matter more than others. You must establish the level of importance of the client outcome. For example, will recruiting the optometrists have a tactical impact, or is it more important than that? What if failing to recruit the required number means the business fails? Clearly, you can charge more for helping achieve something existential or strategic than something which is just tactical. It's the same work, but a very different price. In this case, the client needed to hire 80 optometrists to hit its growth targets and release further investor support for future growth. It needs to hire the optometrists as soon as possible, otherwise revenue will not be generated. So what do you need to know? This example is covered in detail in the book, but I've cut it down for today. The answers to simple questions identified that each optometrist is paid $75,000 a year and can generate $18,750 a month. To hit target, the company needs 15 to be active by end of Q1, another 40 by end of Q2, and another 25 by the end of Q3. The client needs help because they aren't recruiting enough people fast enough. They're currently using recruitment agencies and an employee referral incentive. But these other methods aren't working because many of the applicants they get don't convert to an offer. And half of the people that join leave before the end of their trial. Other questions provided the current number of applicants a month and the conversion from application to interview, from interview to job offer, from job offer to acceptance, and from successful applicant to successful completion of the trial. You now have a lot of information about how important your contribution could be, and information to indicate where you should contribute. This shows that you could deliver so much more value than just press coverage and awareness. You now know that achieving the revenue target is pivotal to future success. Put another way, the help they want has real strategic importance. It's really to help them stay on the growth path by achieving their revenue target, not just hiring people. You're probably thinking, this is too complicated. We'd never ask questions like that or get the answers if we did. You're right, it is more complicated than pricing time, but stick with the example to see where it goes. You know that the client has been using and may continue to use recruitment agents and employee incentives. You know or can deduce that the client pays 25% of the salary for each recruit that comes through a recruitment company. So the cost of using agents is as follows. Each recruit costs 25% of 75,000, 18,750. So 80 at that price costs 1.5 million. So you can see the client is prepared to pay 1.5 million to recruit 80 people. So why charge only 10,000 to help them? The recruitment company doesn't estimate the time it will take to provide their price, so why should you? They also don't bring successful recruits, just opportunities to interview, and this currently isn't working. Your contribution could be just as valuable, if not more so. So based on what we know, you can decide where you will make a valuable contribution. You can increase the number of applicants by raising awareness. You can educate and excite potential applicants so they arrive for an interview in the right frame of mind. You can remove or reduce any anxieties about the job security of joining a PE-backed company so more people apply. And you can improve the conversion to offers from interviews, thus saving the client a lot of time. As you can see, you can clearly identify for the client where you can make a valuable contribution to recruiting optometrists. By monitoring the data at each step, you can prove how your work has enhanced the performance of the process and therefore reduce the cost. Operating in this way shows the client the cause and effect of using you and reinforces why a value-based price is deserved. You can also track when the recruits arrive to demonstrate the value delivered of them arriving early. You can also create upselling opportunities. They invited you to help them hire people, but you've identified that retention through the trial isn't good. So you could propose helping them improve the onboarding process with the right communications, so people receive an employee experience that gives them reasons to stay. So what could or should you charge in this example? If you could bring 80 successful recruits, the opportunity is 1.5 million. But the client is unlikely to dispense with recruitment companies and switch everything to you. Your price could relate to the fact that you'll increase the quality of applicants and the performance of the process at the steps where you identified the strongest contribution. You'll bring some applicants straight to the client, thus avoiding the cost of a recruitment agency. You'll improve the conversion from applicant to offer, thus saving the client a lot of time and bringing through recruits faster, and therefore enhance revenue performance. So the reality is you've got a choice over what you charge if you make your contribution clear. Don't limit what you can charge by showing the client how much time it will take. Instead, show them the financial value of the various ways you will contribute value. For example, for each recruit that avoids the agency route, you will save the client 18,750. Just bringing one recruit direct delivers more value than the original 10,000 price. For each recruit that arrives a month early, you'll add another 18,750 to the revenue. Just doing those two things for one recruit for 1 month is 37,500. Imagine if you did that for 3 out of the 80 recruits, then it's worth 112,500 to the client. While you can't guarantee 3 recruits, all them arriving early, you can show the client enough certainty of your positive impact for them to take a calculated risk. After all, they know other routes aren't delivering what they need. So should it be 18,750 or 50,000 or even 112,500? That's your choice. But by taking a value-based approach, you've moved the time-based price up from 10,000 to something significantly higher, thus delivering a significantly better return for the time invested. You've also shown the client where you will add value and what data needs to be captured and shared to prove that value. Imagine if you operate in this way all the time, and imagine if you publish the proof of the value you deliver in terms that are compelling to economic buyers, not just user buyers. Imagine if you have an explicit methodology that increases the certainty of delivering the outcome, and that you use that method to show in advance where and how you'll deliver value. The net result of all those things will be the opportunity to charge a premium over lesser agencies. So let's say you decided to charge 50,000 rather than 10,000. If you contribute to attracting just 10 other recruits without going through an agency, you've saved the client 187,500. That's a 74% cost saving and a huge return on investment with you. And importantly, it's 5 times the fee for you. It also shows other clients and prospects that they will get a return on investment if they use you. So don't walk past opportunities to earn what you deserve. If you challenge the way you price and link what you do to a contribution to a valuable outcome, you can command much higher prices than time-based pricing. So there's a checklist here, which you'll see when we send the slides through later. Second thing I want to cover is how to change the behavior of your account teams. And if you decide to make the progressive shift to value-based pricing, you'll need to take your people on the journey with you. This will require a significant change in their behavior. So the next few slides look at some of the essential steps to making that happen. Starting with your team is essential if you want to make this work. They will need to understand the benefits of focusing on value and be capable of explaining them to your clients. To do it successfully, they'll need to unlearn some ingrained practices and replace them with more effective behavior. There are at least 6 reasons why the team should welcome this change. By focusing on outcomes, the work will have more purpose and a greater sense of achievement. They'll develop more quickly because there will be more time for personal development and because it will be clearer why things need to be done. And their rewards should improve as the profitability improves, and workload should diminish as over-servicing comes down. The best way to understand how to help your people make this change is to understand how our brains work. Work carried out by neuroscientists in the last couple of decades provides helpful frameworks for what needs to be done. There's a framework called SCARF, created by a neuroscientist called David Rock, which will help you to understand why you need to do certain things to help your people make the desired changes. SCARF is an acronym that addresses 5 needs our brain has for us to feel valued and happy at work. Each of the letters of SCARF will point to some essential actions by you. Again, there's more detail in the book, so I'm going to cover just 2 of the 5 needs now. Certainty is a need we have to understand what will happen next. If something changes in your business, but the implications of this change are not explained, this will cause anxiety, which will negatively impact performance. So it's vital that you explain why you're changing from selling time to selling value and what this means to everyone in the business. You'll also need to give your people the certainty that they have the skills to operate in the new way by training them. You can provide training on the difference between user buyers and economic buyers, what a business outcome looks like, how to use the "why does that matter" question to identify economic drivers for a client, even if it hasn't been shared in the communications brief, how to capture and record economic buyer-friendly data, and how to create high-impact economic buyer reports. There are many ways you can train to provide certainty. These include how to qualify a brief so that it's certain what needs to happen next. A clear brief removes the potential for anxiety that the wrong thing will be delivered. Understanding that a strategy is a journey with a clear start point, destination, and essential steps along the way. How to use priorities to control what you do. How to find ways to reach an output or outcome in the smartest way that takes the least time and effort. This should encourage your people to recognize that they need to have more knowledge and better skills to become an expert, not just a practitioner. A is for autonomy, the need we have to understand the parameters within which we are expected to operate. This is because our brain wants to know what we can decide for ourselves and when we need to seek guidance and approval from others. If you provide the right training and clear briefs to your people, they will welcome the autonomy that comes with finding the smartest way to achieve a client output or outcome. For the optometry client, this would mean giving the team the autonomy to find the best media outlets to attract optometrists and secure coverage that inspires optometrists to send in their CV. By providing the clarity that comes with a clear brief, you will satisfy their need to feel in control and therefore feel able to be proactive. By embedding prioritization into your approach for clients, you will make it clear that work that doesn't deliver against a priority is not worth doing. Another key change in behavior is to focus on outcomes, not tasks. One of the most embedded practices within agencies is to allocate each member of the team a certain amount of time to be expended on a client in a given time period. This allocation is often focused on a task, like writing a press release or selling in a story. This practice gets people to focus on the wrong things. It encourages them to use the time they are allocated to carry out the task rather than achieve important outputs or outcomes. In the case of selling in a story, often this effort will achieve coverage in worthless publications just because it ticks a coverage count target. So switch from tasks to outcomes. If there is a story to sell in, the brief to the individual should be to secure coverage in a certain number of prioritized target publications. This is not because coverage is the objective, but an essential step in the strategy for reaching the destination for the client. It's a step on the journey with the aim of triggering a specific reaction from the target audience, like clicking a link and applying for a job. You should ask the individual to find the smartest way to achieve the target output or outcome, and then stop work. You might allocate a maximum amount of time that is available to achieve the required result, but make it clear you expect the outcome to be achieved in much less time than that. This gets the team to recognize three important things. First, they need to have a lot of knowledge. Knowledge about the client, the story, what it represents, and the media. Without this knowledge, they will not be able to find the smartest way to deliver the required value. Second, that they need to follow Abraham Lincoln's example and sharpen their axe before starting work. And third, that their time is a precious asset, which needs to be used intelligently to deliver value for clients and the agency. The next change is to use a client's business priorities to control what is done. Prioritization is central to charging for value, because it helps people to focus on what matters most to the client. Having clear priorities is also very empowering. It gives your team the certainty and autonomy they need to perform at their best. By using the SCAR framework effectively, you'll be more certain of triggering a reward response in the brain. This will automatically make your people willing to do difficult things, to take risks, to think deeply about issues, and to develop new solutions. In other words, find the most effective route to the client's outcome. To make it easier to focus on priorities, it makes sense to give your people simple prioritization tools like the spider graph on the slide. Again, there's a checklist that will be available to you when you get the slides. The final area to cover is how to move existing clients from time to value. There is no silver bullet for doing this, but it's essential that you understand the different needs and expectations of different buyer roles. They will embrace a value-based approach for different reasons. Economic buyers care about achieving business goals and a certainty of return on investment, and they will allocate budgets to organizations that help them do so. Economic buyers matter most when it comes to winning and retaining a client, because they have complete power over what is spent. They will embrace a value-based approach because it satisfies their need to see a return on investment. For them, time is irrelevant. Time-based reporting is irrelevant. They are paying money for an outcome to be delivered, or more accurately, for a contribution to be made that will make the outcome more certain. Economic buyers understand that an agency will rarely be the only contributor to achieving an outcome. So they want to see how, when, and where the agency will contribute to making an outcome more certain. If presented with an activity list as proof of value, they will reject it. And it will reinforce their view that the money may be better spent elsewhere. Economic buyers will acknowledge a great piece of press coverage, but only if someone has made the connection between the coverage and something they value, like a prospect being in contact. User buyers care about how the agency will help them do their job and how you will make them look good in the process. They look at things from an activity perspective. What is done, not why it is done. They don't care how long an agency spends on the activities, just that they are done. They look at retainers as a bank of time that is replenished every month, and therefore expect the same level of work each month. By moving to a value-based approach, you instantly remove this constantly replenishing bank of time. You need to replace it with an approach that reassures them that you'll be even more helpful to them, and that you will make them look good to their boss and other senior people in the organization. You'll need to train them to expect peaks and troughs of activity according to what it takes to deliver agreed priority outcomes. So one of the objectives of making the switch from selling time to selling value is to break the time to revenue equation. It will enable you to increase revenues without adding people, and you'll be able to remove many of the reasons for overservicing. The key to making the shift successfully is to embrace and embed the power of prioritization. To keep user buyers supportive, you'll need to help them understand why the focus on the why behind the what is good for them. This won't come naturally, because many user buyers have been trained by agencies to expect a what level of focus. So there are a number of ways you can start to get existing clients to embrace a value-based approach. Again, these are covered in the book, but I'm going to look at 3 now. One simple step is to sell back the business value delivered by adding a companion report to the usual time-based activity report. This would be an economic buyer-friendly summary, most likely delivered as a 2-minute video. This progressive transformation provides the time to educate the client about the benefits of the new approach so that they welcome the shift when it comes. You can use contract renewal to make the change. You can use the renewal as a reason to seek clarity on the current business objectives. And you could do this as part of a special prioritization workshop with the economic buyer present, where you can capture the data you need to understand the value of reaching the desired outcome, or the cost of not doing so. You can then show the client a picture of their current position and paint a picture of the destination based on what is shared in the prioritization workshop. Then you can present a strategy for filling the gap from the start point to the destination and emphasize the steps where you will deliver a valuable contribution. If you highlight the barriers you will overcome on the way and how significant those barriers are, you'll be able to quantify the value of your contribution. You can introduce an economic buyer report a few months ahead of renewal, so they understand the business impact of your existing work and are therefore receptive to changing your approach to deliver even more impact. You could launch a solution that can command a premium price. Excuse me. Agencies tend to sell activity, not solutions to problems. For example, when a client launches a new product, most agencies will run a media relations campaign or a launch briefing for the media. Instead, why don't you have a sales success solution that is seen to contribute to the success of the product at launch? This will be seen as much more valuable by an economic buyer. All you need to make clear is how you will contribute to that success, such as driving visits to a launch landing page, for example. Again, there's a checklist here that will be available to you. The more you can take a progressive approach to secure your future by eliminating waste from the way you operate, by presenting and pricing your services according to how they deliver greater certainty of value to clients, the more likely you are to succeed. As the adage goes, the longest journey starts with the smallest step. You won't get there in a giant leap, but getting there will definitely be worth the journey. The reality is our clients live in very challenging times, so they will seek out people who provide solutions to their biggest problems: growing, retaining talent, securing a license to operate, etc. So be that expert that can contribute to making their success more certain. I'm sure I've created more questions than I've answered, and I'll do my best to answer some of them now. But please feel free to email me with any other questions you may have, and I'll do my best to give you some guidance.
Thank you so much, Crispin. We do have a few questions already. So I'll start with Joanna's question. How can an agency ensure competitiveness in the market when applying value-based pricing if other agencies are still applying a time-based model?
That's a great question. And as I suggested in some of the presentation, that a lot of the answer to that comes down to how well you prove the business value of what you deliver for other clients. If we were all to go online now and to look at 30 agencies and how they present themselves, you will see that the majority present themselves in very similar style based on activities. If you, on the other hand, demonstrate that every time you work for a client, you deliver a high level of return on investment, clients will be prepared to pay a premium for that over people who can't give them that sense of certainty. So the short answer is, why does Haaland get paid more than some other striker in the Premier League? It's because every week he proves he's better. So you've got to go out there and you've got to prove you're better by bringing the results of what you do to the surface, the business value of the results to the surface. Yesterday, I was talking to the MD of an agency, was actually in Italy, and he said that he had sat in a pitch this week, and his team had presented all of their great ideas about how they could make a difference to the client. And at the end of the presentation, the client said, "So how will we measure the value of what you do for us?" And his team didn't have an answer other than the traditional answer that PR companies give, which is, well, you'll be able to see that through the coverage that we generate. But for that particular client, they weren't buying coverage. They're actually a subscription TV channel, and what they wanted was to spend money to help them grow their business. So just showing them coverage wasn't going to do it. So I know that's a very lengthy answer to what sounded like a simple question, but hopefully I've got there for you.
Fantastic. And that actually leads me on to the next question, which happens to be by our new CEO, James. How can you measure effectiveness, particularly in the media, when media companies themselves struggle to quantify that?
Again, it's a good question. I think the answer to the question comes in how good you are at asking questions of the client before you start work. So what the PR sector has tried to do to prove its value is it's tried to find some metrics like share of voice, or sentiment analysis or whatever. But the reality is, share of voice in and of itself doesn't actually deliver a return for a client. So by asking more questions about why they want you to do the work, you can begin to identify which steps on the journey to achieving that you will contribute to making a difference. And if, for example, with a particular client, it's all about driving the right kind of people to a website, then focusing on online coverage with links would deliver more value than focusing on offline coverage. Now, it may sound like a really obvious thing to say, but if you're not driven by the outcome, you would just go out and get coverage and say, well, awareness and visibility is helping. But if you can tie it down to a specific contribution like that, you can then start to measure the impact of that particular contribution. And in the context of that optometry example, you could start to track whether, since you started, the volume of quality applicants has increased, and therefore demonstrate the effectiveness of the work that you do.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And then we also have a question from Steve. So he says some great points. The content on price and based on opportunity costs to the client makes sense if working for the private sector clients. But how might we go about calculating value-based pricing in the public sector?
Okay, it's a good question. I guess, at risk of sounding like a cracked record, I would work very hard to ask questions to identify why they're asking you to help them. If it's, I mean, we all, I guess we've all seen the latest with Somerset Council about to go bankrupt, etc., etc. So if Somerset County Council was approaching you to help them communicate, you would really want to know, well, what specifically are they trying to what are they asking us to help them achieve? So if it was to get understanding about why certain services would have to be scrapped, or to win support from organisations to support those services in the absence of council funding, then you would develop a strategy for how you would trigger the right reaction. So if you've got clarity about the outcome and the value of that outcome, then the same would apply within the public sector environment as it would in the private sector environment. I mean, one of the agencies I help, they do quite a lot of work within the NHS environment, and although we tend to think of public sector as not being desperately commercial, a lot of the same rules will apply. I mean, one example with this agency is they have an NHS agency whose job is to get healthcare professionals to learn new skills, and their funding is dependent on selling out their quota of people on the training. So once you ask the right questions, you can begin to identify the points on the journey where you can make a contribution.
Fantastic, thank you. We've got quite a few more questions that have come in. So I've got one from Lucy. She says, we love the idea. How do you implement value-based pricing operationally? I think you covered this with Scarf. We have a set number of hours worked per week per team member. So how do we make the switch but still ensure that we're performing profitably?
Okay, so it's all about the thing about making this switch is, as I think I said, is the problem pretty much every agency has at the moment in trying to contemplate making this move is that we've trained everyone to think about life based on time, and the challenge with that is that if you say to an account exec, you've got 4 hours to spend on this client this week, they will go and spend it. They'll do lots of stuff, but the stuff may not contribute to something that the client will value. So to make the shift, you have to get them to start from the outcome and work back, rather than to start with the activity and work forward. And if this is probably you might think this is a bit of a twee answer, but the reality is that, let's say a client really wanted to get in front of the most influential person in their sector, and because of the status of their business, there was no reason why that should happen, but it just so happens that one of your account directors family knows this person really well, and you can unlock that opportunity with a 15-minute phone call. How would you price for that? Would you charge for 15 minutes? Or would you look at the impact of that meeting on the client's business? So similarly, internally, do you say to people, well, because we focus on media relations, we're going to work through the usual media relations process to end up with awareness, or do you say to the guys, there are only really 2 outlets here that will make a difference to this particular client? Focus your time and attention on getting those guys to get the right messages out. So rather than briefing them to do lots of work with lots of outlets, prioritize it down to the ones that will make a difference, and give them the autonomy to find the smartest way of getting the result that you want, because that could be done in a whole lot less time.
Fantastic, thank you.
The other thing I'd add to that, because I didn't really cover it, is that we focused a bit on specific activities, and one of the biggest issues about making this shift is you're actually going to have to spend a reasonable amount of time in training people and coaching them about how best to do this. And one of the challenges for pretty much every agency is they don't have that time. And therefore, I think one of the key things that you've got to do is you've got to look at other things you do in your business which drain time away but don't deliver a great return for it. And one of the obvious targets is the way that you run meetings, the duration, the frequency, the number of people in them. And if you change just some of those things across all of your meetings, you would actually release huge amounts of time. For one agency, I ran the calculation for them, and it was a combination of moving from weekly calls to fortnightly calls and switching calls from an hour to 45 minutes. And over the number of clients that they had, that actually released 3.5 people in terms of time. Okay, you can use that time very, very effectively to coach and train people to embrace this new approach.
Fantastic. I second that with meetings. I think that seems to be a corporate issue. Too many meetings. And so we have a question from Emma, one of our South African members. How can you prove contribution when media often remove links from earned coverage? Would this make digital and social media more valuable? Or would it be on the conversation side, where they would answer a question about where they heard about the brand?
Right, Emma, good question. Again, I think obviously links make life a lot easier than coverage without links, but there are other ways that you can use media coverage to deliver a contribution to a client, which sometimes the client doesn't see for themselves, such as creating the great coverage and then converting it into a tool to be used either by the digital marketing team or the sales team to assist other parts of the work that they do. And if agencies don't necessarily look at doing that because they quite often see the end game for them as the coverage. But if they're thinking about a contribution to a more important business outcome, like generating sales leads or converting sales leads, while your agency might not be involved in the conversion of them, the content that you create could provide a very effective tool for someone else to go and convert them. And so if you look at the content you help create for a client and think about how that's going to be used could be used proactively, at that point, you could start to identify the data you want the client to share with you to demonstrate how that content has improved the effectiveness of a downstream activity by the client themselves. So you go beyond just the awareness to actually creating a tool that can be used to deliver more business value. Hopefully that makes sense.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And then we'll end with a final question from Tony. You mentioned having both time-based and value-based pricing side by side. But in that case, how do you manage your team and ensure things like over-servicing doesn't happen if you adopt the value-based pricing?
Okay, good question. The reason why I said that they could live side by side is that I think all the agencies that I've been talking to about making this transition want to have the comfort of at least estimating a starting price by using the time pricing model. So let's say you're responding to that optometrist brief that we put in the presentation, and they worked out how they were going to make their contribution, and they calculated, right, well, that's going to be a 10,000 fee. So what I would say to you is if you use time-based pricing to identify the minimum you're prepared to charge, okay, because that's the amount of effort that's going to go into it at your normal rates, what you can then do is by asking the right questions to say, what's the upside? And as you can see from the optometry example, there is a huge potential upside. So you could say, well, we're just going to charge 10,000 because that's our time-based pricing model. But equally, you could go, well, we're going to charge 50. And let's assume that you said, right, we're going to charge 50. You wouldn't then go to your team and say, you've now got 5 times more time to spend on this. You'd say, you've got the original amount of time to spend on this, and we expect you to deliver these priority things in that time allocated. So you can still use time to direct a team, but use the outcome for the client as the driver for how they go about delivering success, if that makes sense. So time-based pricing is the minimum, value-based pricing gives you an upside, which just creates greater opportunity for profitability. And if you have that upside, the concept of over-servicing starts to dissipate really quickly.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Crispin. I think we're just about on time now. Obviously, everybody is more than welcome to please go out and get the book. And Crispin also delivers some training sessions for PRCA on value-based pricing as well. So you can find all of that stuff on our website. So I just wanted to wrap up really and thank Crispin for guiding us through the journey of value-based pricing for your agency, and thank everybody for joining us as well. So I do hope to see you on the next session, which is scheduled for next month and available to book on our website. I'll be joined in February by experts from across the United Kingdom as we break down everything an individual or an agency beyond the UK needs to know about venturing into or collaborating with UK businesses. So I hope to see you then, and thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you again, Crispin.
Thanks a lot, everyone. Take care.